She thought she could take my kids, my home, and disappear with her new man, but she forgot one thing: I don't lose without a fight. Why do some people throw away the comfort of a quiet, happy life just to chase something fleeting, some new thrill that'll only leave destruction behind? That question haunts me. See, this story isn't just about infidelity. It's about a carefully orchestrated plan, one that nearly cost me everything I owned. But this isn't just their story. It's mine too. And now I'm ready to tell it. I woke up that morning with a strange knot twisting in my stomach. There was a hand on my back, soft at first, then another slowly inching beneath my underwear. My head pounded, not from the wine last night but from something heavier. Something unspoken. Something wrong. "I don't like mornings, Chase," I murmured, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry," he said, almost like a child caught doing something he knew he shouldn't. "But what about all those times you told me how you and Matt used to make love nonstop back then?" I sighed, staring at the ceiling. "I was 20, Chase," I muttered. "That was a different life." He went quiet. His silence carried a kind of sad puppy dog weight that made me question my choices all over again. At first, everything seemed picture perfect. I had traded a man in his 40s, Matt, my husband, who was constantly buried in work, for a younger guy who hung on my every word, every movement, every breath. Chase made me feel seen. Important. But there was always a cost. Matt wasn't some overbearing control freak. He wasn't cruel. But he could cut me down with a single smirk and a walkaway shrug. He rarely argued. That almost made it worse. He had this calm indifference that made me feel like my words barely registered. He'd just go out to the garage and throw himself into that old Mustang of his, the car I grew to hate with every fiber of my being. It was strange. The more I pulled away from him physically, the more he started talking. Like my rejection had flipped a switch. Just as my mother had warned me it might. Then came the calendar. I spotted it one afternoon while cleaning up the kitchen. The entire upcoming weekend was marked in red ink. So were a few days before it. I knew those markings meant something, but not yet. Until I checked the sock drawer. Tucked between two pairs of ankle socks was a glossy brochure. I unfolded it and felt the air leave my lungs. A high-end gentleman's retreat in Las Vegas. Smiling women barely dressed. Exclusively discreet. Unapologetically indulgent, the tagline read. The kind of place you don't just browse casually. He had canceled our plans earlier that morning. Now it all made sense. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly where this was headed. Matt was already slipping away from me, quicker than his Mustang could hit 60 on an open highway. That night I tried something I hadn't in a while. I reached for him, not out of desire but desperation. Rage, heartbreak, fear, it all collided in me at once. "Make love to me," I whispered. But he looked at me with nothing behind his eyes. "Not tonight," he said, brushing it off like I had asked about what to eat for dinner. No care. No thought. No effort. The rejection crushed me. Days passed. Then a week. "Come on, Matt, it's been a week," I pleaded, feeling hollow. "I'm just not in the mood," he said without even turning around. "I could help," I offered, my voice almost cracking. But his silence told me everything I needed to know. I tried to force a smile, but it barely made it to my lips. All I really wanted in that moment was to break free. Free from him, from the tension, from the ache of pretending. "Please, baby," I said softly, leaning in, hoping maybe this time would be different. "Let me take care of you." Travis hesitated, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. It just feels like your heart isn't in it. Maybe give it another week?" His words caught me completely off guard, though deep down, I shouldn't have been surprised. We'd been circling this same pattern for years. No matter what I tried, advice from TV talk shows, glossy magazine tips, even my mom's old tricks, he always managed to hold the emotional upper hand. He never yelled. He never hit. He just drifted. And I kept chasing. Then there was Adam. Adam worshipped me. He saw me as some kind of goddess who could do no wrong. He did everything I asked without hesitation, like making me happy was his entire purpose. So why hadn't I left Travis for him? 2 reasons. First, and I hate admitting it, part of me still loved Travis. Not the way he ignored me, not the way he buried himself in work or avoided physical closeness, but something deeper. I was still clinging to the version of him I first fell for. The version who made promises and made me believe them. Second, the money. Adam had a heart full of love but pockets full of nothing. Travis, on the other hand, the man I married, earned 6 figures, carried himself with stability, and built a life I wasn't ready to walk away from, even if I resented the way he'd built it. On the surface we looked like we had it all. But inside, it was all erosion. What once was passion had curdled into longing, and that longing hardened into quiet resentment. 20 years of that will wear anyone down. Still, when Adam touched me like he did that afternoon, gently tracing circles on my thighs trying to lift my spirits, it was tender, thoughtful. He never wanted to hurt me. That mattered. "Can you rub my back?" I asked, trying to redirect my thoughts. "Of course," he said, instantly attentive. I didn't tell him how his constant touch, while well-meaning, often pulled me out of my own thoughts. It made it harder to think, to focus. But I let him anyway. After my surgery, new breasts, new hair, a whole new version of me, I'd noticed a change. The sensitivity was gone. My body looked the way I thought it should, but it didn't feel the way it used to. Funny how that works. Still, even through that, Travis had always been the only one who truly knew how to give me pleasure. When it came to intimacy, he was remarkable. He knew my body like it was home. I couldn't deny it. In the bedroom he was unmatched. Bigger than Adam. More experienced. Somehow, even when we were at odds, he could unravel me with nothing but a touch. And yet, part of me still questioned whether he had ever cheated. Maybe it was wrong to even wonder. He worked hard to keep our life together. He deserved my honesty. He deserved a clear, adult conversation about where we stood. If we couldn't fix this, we'd part ways. That was the promise I made myself. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't graceful. But it felt necessary. Over the 2 decades we'd been married, Travis had never raised a hand to me. Never threatened, never controlled. I knew if I told him how I truly felt, he'd either find a way to work with me, or try to talk me out of it. Either way, he'd listen. But sometimes reason doesn't get results. Sometimes people only notice when you rattle the walls. I took a long breath, steadying myself. It was time to act before the whole thing crumbled on its own. I needed to make a move, loud enough for him to hear it. Outside, I heard the rumble of trucks, probably the neighbors unloading new furniture. I barely noticed. My hand was already reaching for the phone. I picked it up and dialed. I knew the ringtone by heart. It was one of those details you remember without trying. It only rang once before I heard the click in the middle of the second ring. "Bradley?" I asked, confused, the phone still in my hand. But instead it was Lauren. "What are you doing to me?" I asked, my voice low, unsure if I wanted the real answer. Her tone was soft but steady. "I'm just trying to make you happy, Aaron." I couldn't help it. Something inside me gave way. "Truth is, I've been happy ever since I met you." She smirked, just enough to tease. "You'll be even happier once we're through with this." I reached for the phone again, heart hoping, maybe dreading, that the next call would offer clarity. Instead, it blindsided me. It was the moving company. I had completely forgotten they were supposed to call when they got here. Lauren's expression darkened. "It's not going to be easy, Aaron," she said, almost like she was bracing herself. Then came the words that knocked the wind out of me. "Your wife is cheating on you." She didn't flinch. Didn't soften the blow. She said it like she was pointing out the weather. At first, I just stared at her. It took a second to register. But her voice, calm and unshaken, left no room for misunderstanding. And deep down, I knew she was right. The truth landed with the weight of a collapsing building. My chest tightened and I could feel sweat on my forehead. My heart was racing. Tears threatened to fall before I could even swallow the lump in my throat. Then she said something that hit even deeper. He still thinks his idea of the perfect woman is real. He doesn't get that most of it was artificial." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. I felt caught between confusion and rage. The kind of rage that doesn't even have a voice. It just sits there in your gut like a fire you can't put out. Lauren kept talking. She told me how they met. How the entire scheme was planned out in secret. How they thought they'd found the perfect way to remove me, quietly, from my own life and take everything I'd worked for. They wanted me out of the picture, like I was some inconvenient detail in a story that no longer needed me. Lauren, as it turned out, had her own reasons. She'd been stuck in a situation not so different from mine, though hers came with a few more shadows and blurred lines. We were sitting in my Mustang when she finally looked at me, really looked at me. The way her green eyes caught the light in that dim interior made everything feel surreal. "You finally get it, don't you?" she said with a knowing smile. "Get what?" She let out a soft laugh. Charming, honest, a little sad. It was one of the things I loved about her most. The sound of it cut through the chaos in my head. "You were so wrapped up in surviving, in providing, in fixing everything, that you didn't even notice I was a woman. That I was this woman." There was no venom in her voice, only a quiet kind of hurt. But there was something else too, something warm. Hopeful. I asked her why she was still here, why she stayed when things were so messed up. I broke things off with CJ weeks ago, she said, a little nervous. At some point the whole idea of revenge just stopped making sense. I didn't want to hurt him anymore. I wanted to help you. The strange thing was, no one knew. Not my wife. Not the movers. Not anyone in our circle. No one had any idea that Lauren and I had history. No clue that somewhere along the line we'd fallen into something real. We'd gotten away with it. And because of that we had more time. More time to talk. More time to be honest. And somehow, through the wreckage of everything else, that time allowed what started as distraction to become something much more grounded. Real love. The kind that sneaks up on you when you're too bruised to be looking for it. I called Lauren at exactly 7:20 p.m. while she was still at work. My voice was steady even though my hands trembled. I'm ready, I told her. We were practically glued to each other every night by then, talking, plotting, trying to build something out of the wreckage. You're such an idiot, she said with a playful giggle on the other end of the line. That's not enough. I know, I said quietly. But it's a start. I paused. We haven't even been intimate yet. Still, everything we had planned was starting to fall into place. Sure, it had started as a lie, a carefully crafted illusion to throw them off. But it worked. For a while. And then her mother got sick. It couldn't have come at a worse time. The scammers, the ones who thought they were clever, were acting under the assumption that Lauren and I had both left town. That illusion led to a very important phone call. A call that didn't go as smoothly as we had hoped. We were expecting it Friday evening. The moving truck was scheduled for Sunday morning. That gave the lovebirds, my wife and her charming little con artist, just enough time to settle in, play house, and celebrate what they thought was their grand victory. But life had other plans. I tried to confront him. Trevor, the man who thought he could steal not just my wife but my whole life. Your letter made me stop and think, he said, laughing harder than the situation called for. About why you did it. His words pierced straight through me. I felt my blood run cold. How the hell did he know about the letter? No one, not even Lauren, knew I had written that letter to Brooke. It was supposed to be attached to the divorce papers. I poured everything into it, what I felt, where we went wrong, the regret, the honesty. It was private, deeply personal. And now this stranger was quoting it back to me. He grinned, leaning in as if this was some kind of game he had already won. You should probably start packing, he said. Brooke's feeling generous today. She stepped forward, suddenly all business. I understand if you're upset, she said. But I expect you to handle this respectfully. You need to be out of this house by the end of the day. I stood my ground. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice clear. This house belongs to me and my wife. We're almost done paying it off. That's when Trevor, like the coward he is, called the cops. Really? I asked Brooke. He's calling the police? It'll make things faster, she said without flinching. This house isn't yours. And then, like a scene from some twisted sitcom, he and the woman next to him burst into laughter. The woman, heavy-set and smug, wiped tears from her eyes. Can we move forward now? She asked, trying to stifle another laugh. Of course, the officer on site responded, clearly siding with them. I refused to budge. Mark sold the house? That's ridiculous, I protested. This is my home. Brooke didn't blink. I chose to keep it even if he paid for it. But the officer stepped in. He bought it with his money. The deed has only his name on it. That gives him the right to do whatever he wants with it. It was like watching the world tilt sideways. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the weight of it all collapse in my chest. The humiliation. The betrayal. The finality. A woman always gets the short end, I muttered under my breath, thinking back on every sacrifice, every compromise I'd made for a marriage that turned into a transaction. Later that week, after Trevor quit his job, I called the bank. I want to close all joint accounts, I told Carly, the manager I'd known for years, and transfer the funds into a new one. She paused. Are you sure you want to withdraw everything? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. Every last cent. I just confirmed it. Jake would land on his feet faster than Tina could inhale a bucket of chicken wings. That man always had a knack for bouncing back. This is all the money I've got until the divorce is finalized, I told the woman at the bank. She nodded, patient but firm. You'll need to write a check for the full amount, and then we'll transfer it into your new account. Fine, I snapped, more from exhaustion than anger. I signed the check like I was closing a chapter one wasn't ready for but had no choice but to end. But something wasn't sitting right. I don't even think he's going to show up to court, I admitted. Last I heard he skipped town. He bailed before I could. My attorney frowned. If you don't know where he is, how are you planning to serve him the divorce papers? That hit me like a dead weight. Was it even possible to divorce someone who just vanished? Can I just drop the whole thing? I asked, more out of desperation than logic. He leaned back in his chair. In this state? You're looking at a 3-year wait if he doesn't sign. I nearly laughed out loud. And how exactly am I supposed to survive for 3 years on my savings? I reminded him, loudly, that Jake had left me high and dry. No warning. No explanation. Just vanished. And the kicker? The same day he disappeared, his girlfriend dumped him. I know, right? You can't make this stuff up. It almost felt like the universe was trying to play matchmaker by burning the whole thing down first. One afternoon I was driving home, the kind of exhausted that goes beyond physical. I had just finished a double shift scrubbing offices, 6 days a week, no time to cry, no energy to think, and the radio was playing. I don't know why I left it on. I wasn't even listening. Until it hit me. The Eagles. I never paid much attention to them. But Glenn Frey's voice came through the speakers like it was carrying a memory straight into my chest. I couldn't stop it. I pulled over, rolled up the windows, and sobbed like a kid. That song, our song apparently. The one Jake used to sing to me half serious, half drunkenly in the kitchen on Friday nights. He'd whisper those ridiculous lyrics and smile like he knew something I didn't. It all came rushing back. And for the first time in a long time I realized I'd been wrong. The power had always been in my hands, I was just too afraid to use it. Jake wasn't perfect. But he tried. He truly tried to make me happy. He gave everything he had, and when I pushed too hard he stood his ground. That used to frustrate me, until I realized it meant he was real. When I decided to end things he took it like a knife to the chest. It was personal to him. And somehow he was still the one who made the first move toward reconciliation. And maybe, just maybe, he'd take me back. But if that was even on the table, he'd have to prove it. Really prove it. No half-hearted texts. No vague promises. I needed a man who'd show up. I wiped my eyes, took a breath, and walked out of the bar where I'd been nursing too many what-ifs. Across the street was a little cafe. I crossed, walked inside, and took a seat at a small table by the window. The kind of table where things begin again, or end for good. That's when I saw him. CJ. He walked in like nothing had changed, like we weren't both living inside the fallout. He sat at the table next to mine. 2 college kids were tossing beanbags outside and laughing at some game they barely understood. CJ didn't notice me at first. But I noticed everything. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I thought about what he said, his strange riddle like some puzzle meant to shake me awake. And as I sat there, going over it again and again, something finally clicked. He wasn't wrong. For all my desperate gestures, all my trying to prove a point or reclaim control, I realized what I missed wasn't revenge or pride. It was the life I had before everything unraveled. The ordinary, peaceful life I had once led. The love I'd taken for granted. The man I let slip away. I longed for that life again. And then, as if summoned by my own guilt and longing, I saw him, Mark. He looked good. Really good. Healthier, stronger, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman, red hair, young, radiant. She was pregnant. Not just glowing but really beaming. And between them, holding both their hands, was a little girl. Probably 5, maybe 6. Her features were unmistakably theirs, a blend of the two, but those eyes, that hair. Mark's genes were undeniable. I froze. The kind of stillness where everything in your body keeps moving except your breath. That life I was longing for? Someone else was living it now. He had moved on. Built a family. And in some cruel way I was happy for him, but shattered for myself. I didn't even realize I'd started walking until my legs carried me down the street, memories flooding my mind. Years ago, life was ordinary in the best possible way. We took short trips. Nothing extravagant, just 2-day getaways or the occasional week-long escape. And even with all the chaos in the world, I came home almost every night. We had a rhythm, a routine. I used to be married to a man I adored. We were building something steady and warm. Then 9/11 happened and the world flipped upside down. Not long after, my friend Brian and I were unexpectedly deployed. Of all places, Iraq. I still remember how hard it was saying goodbye to everyone, especially not knowing how long we'd be gone or what we were walking into. We were part of a 12-man team, and when the situation escalated, we had no choice but to retreat. 2 days later, Blackhawks came to extract us. By then, only 4 of us were able to walk. 3 of our guys never made it home. The hardest blow came for Brian. He took a tendon injury in his knee, career-ending but not life-threatening. They flew him back to the hospital in our hometown while the rest of us stayed back to recover and readjust. We had to slowly reintegrate into civilian life, if you could call it that. I carried that trauma like a ghost on my back for years. But all of that faded for a moment when I saw Kate, my oldest, pop up on the video call. Her face lit up the screen, lounging on our living room couch with that pink laptop I'd gotten her last Christmas. "Dad," she squealed. And just like that, her little sister climbed into view too. Both of them talking over each other, their voices tripping and tumbling in excitement. For the next half hour, I wasn't a soldier or a broken man or a ghost clinging to the past. I was just Dad. The real reason I was still standing. They asked about Uncle Nick, both of them chiming in at once, their words overlapping, completely impossible to follow. And I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long time. No matter how much I'd lost, there were still pieces of me left in the world that mattered more than anything else. I caught just a few words at first: slippery, he hit me, doesn't like us. Then I heard Kate's voice, small but steady. "Okay girls, be quiet now," she said. "Kate, you go first." And then I heard the words that nearly broke me. "No, Dad. We don't love him. He doesn't care about us. When Mom's not around, he treats us bad. Sometimes I hear screaming from her room when he sleeps over." My heart cracked open. I've heard things no one should ever have to hear in my life, but nothing hits harder than hearing your own child say she's afraid. I'd always worried. There was something about him, Nick, that never sat right. But this was worse than anything I'd imagined. And then, on the laptop screen, I saw them, Pam and that same man sitting at the kitchen table, a half-finished bottle of wine between them. They were deep in conversation, so deep they didn't even notice the laptop until Kate placed it down and said, "Mom, Dad wants to talk to you." They both froze. Pam spun around, eyes wide, her face draining of color. Nick looked like he wanted to slide under the table and disappear. "Hi, Pam," I said evenly, nodding at the man beside her. "Nick." Neither of them spoke at first. Just open mouths and wide eyes, like they'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. She nodded but didn't say a word. Couldn't even look at me. And then I said what I knew would cut straight through the fog. "In your little dream, Pam, you thought you'd just take my kids away from me, didn't you?" She flinched. Art. Like I'd hit a nerve she didn't even know she had. She hadn't even considered that I'd fight back. That's what stunned me the most, not the betrayal, but the arrogance of thinking I wouldn't come for them. I leaned forward slightly, kept my voice calm, almost too calm. "Pam, remember all those long conversations we used to have? You know, back when we actually talked? All those debates about nature versus nurture, genetics versus environment? What really shapes our kids?" She stared at me, unsure where I was going. I didn't stop. "You seem to think I forgot all of that. That I'd just vanish. That because you got caught up in your own mess, you could rewrite the story." I turned to Nick, who was still sitting there like a statue. "There's something you should know, Nick," I said. "Pam seems to have forgotten this part too." She cut in, trying to regain control. "You were in the Air Force, weren't you? Flying those planes or whatever?" I shook my head. "No, Pam. I wasn't a pilot. I served in the Army." She looked confused. "So did Nick. In the Special Air Service." "Yes," I said slowly, letting the weight of it settle in. Nick's expression shifted from confusion to realization to full-on panic. He knew the name. Everyone knows the name. "I don't make threats, Nick. I don't need to. I spent years learning how to end things quietly, precisely. I've done it before." He blinked, visibly rattled. "I didn't want to destroy anyone," I added. "But last week alone, I took down 10 or 12 in a controlled environment. It was a slow week." Nick swallowed hard. Pam's lips parted, but she had nothing to say. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, the balance shifted. They saw me again. Not just the ex-husband. Not just the quiet soldier who went away and came back with ghosts. They saw the man who never stopped being a father. I didn't count how many there were. At the time, it didn't feel important. Most were taken down by gunfire. Quickly. But one of them got close, too close, while I was reloading. He caught me off guard, and I didn't have time to reach for my sidearm. So I did what I was trained to do. I drove my blade upward, angled just right, slicing through the diaphragm and into the heart. It was instinct. No hesitation. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Whoever said that had no idea how literal it could be. And yet, somehow, even that moment felt less disturbing than what came next. When Pam saw what I was capable of, really saw it, her fear turned into something else entirely. Something deeper. Something close to dread. She realized finally that I wasn't bluffing. That I wasn't the man she could manipulate anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I just told the truth. And she understood that truth wasn't something she wanted to challenge. One thing I know for certain, my daughters will grow up knowing exactly where I stand when it comes to betrayal. Infidelity isn't just a broken promise. It's a fire that can raise an entire family to the ground. Still, I took a breath and shifted gears. Emotional reactions could only get me so far. What my girls needed now was logic, stability, and a plan. There's research, plenty of it, that shows children can suffer more from the chaos of divorce than from the death of a parent. I don't say that lightly. But what we were going through. This wasn't a normal separation. It was sabotage disguised as family. Pam stayed quiet as I laid it all out. She wasn't surprised. Not anymore. She knew I was done playing games. I gave her the name of an army lawyer, someone who knew how to navigate these kinds of cases with precision. Civilian judges tend to respect military attorneys, and I wasn't taking any chances with my daughter's future. I had already made up my mind, I wasn't coming back here again. Before all this, I worried whether I could even handle the situation. I hadn't seen them in so long. I feared my presence would just make things worse. But now my fear isn't about the moment. It's about the future. About what happens to a man's soul when he's forced to keep choosing violence just to protect what's his. I've killed more men than I care to remember. But what scares me now is how easy it's become. Back home, I plan to teach at the base. Nothing glamorous, just training the next generation. More than anything, it means I'll be home every night. I'll be there when they fall asleep, when they wake up, when they cry and when they laugh. That's what they need. Not some twisted excuse for a family, but a father who shows up every single day. Pam barely saw them these days anyway. Most of her time was spent buried in her own guilt or nursing wine bottles while they visited old friends. Julia's kids, Simon's kids. People who still knew what family was supposed to feel like. She asked once about reconciliation. I didn't answer. I just looked at her with that part of me that had gone cold, the part that had stopped believing in second chances. And she knew. Whatever this once was, it was over. We never spoke of it again. After that day, Pam kept her distance. She made sure we were never alone, never in the same room unless it was absolutely necessary. It was obvious, I'd frightened her. And honestly, I didn't blame her. Some truths are too raw to look in the eye. I settled into my new role as an instructor at the base. It was quieter than the field. Safer. It gave me structure and let me be home in time for dinner, something I hadn't appreciated until I'd lost it. My girls needed normalcy. I needed it too. Then everything shifted again. It wasn't about me anymore, it was about Nick. No one saw it coming. One second he was walking through the woods on a routine trip with Peter and the others, and the next he was down. He'd taken a hit, a sharp, clean strike from the front. Dropped like a stone. He blacked out before he even hit the ground, and when he came to, Peter was the only one still by his side. The others had run for help. But Peter wasn't helping. Nick saw it then, the smirk on Peter's face. The way he was gripping the feathered shaft of the arrow, pulling it loose like he was plucking a quill from a goose. And then the pain, pure, searing pain, cut through everything. He screamed or tried to. And then everything went black again. He didn't wake up after that. 10 minutes later he was gone. The coroner barely gave the body a second look. Cold. Clinical. Like they'd seen it 100 times before and had already decided what the story was. Maybe they blamed Pam. Maybe they blamed fate. Either way, Nick was gone. Just another line in a long file of things that can't be undone. Pam didn't come around much anymore. Once a week at best. She'd show up like a ghost, watchful, quiet, like the air in the room changed when she entered. Then Megan moved in. 9 months after Pam left. She was a journalist, sharp, confident, and honest in ways that Pam never could be. She'd come to cover the medal ceremony honoring my unit, and somewhere in that chaos, we found something in each other. It wasn't long before the girls started calling her by name. Smiling when she came home. Laughing again. They stopped picking up Pam's calls. Eventually she stopped trying. One day she waited outside the school hoping to catch them. She watched from her car as both girls ran out the doors, straight into Megan's arms. Hugged her like she'd always been their mom. Pam didn't even get a phone call on her birthday. I heard later she found a plain envelope on her porch. No name. No return address. She stared at it for hours, too curious to throw it away but too afraid to open it. Eventually, after John left for work, she gave in. Inside was a newspaper clipping. At first, it made no sense. A random article about a hunter found dead in the woods, killed by an arrow. But as she read further, her eyes widened. It wasn't just some nameless stranger. It was Nick. And suddenly it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a message.